This video is sponsored by Factor, chef-crafted meals delivered right to your doorstep. Staying on track with your personal, professional, and health goals is a drag. How can you possibly fit everything in there, on top of eating tasty yet healthy meals? And 3 of them a day at that! Well, Factor makes things so darn easy. I love not wasting time cooking and cleaning or heading to one of those cursed delivery apps. I can just go to the Factor meals I had delivered in my fridge and select one knowing it's gonna be a good time. And just 2 minutes later, straight out of the microwave, I have a restaurant quality meal that'll leave me satisfied for ages. No, ages is until my next meal, which, oh, of course you know it's gonna be from Factor. I genuinely really enjoy Factor's meal options, especially their current selection, which has been greatly expanded, now offering 80 plus rotating weekly meals. So buddy, if any of this speaks to you, you know what to do. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code STASHFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code STASHFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Good night, sweet prince. Fellas, handheld gaming is dead! No, I don't care. That doesn't count. That doesn't count. That doesn't count! Okay, so handheld gaming isn't really dead, but you know, like when it comes to dedicated portables, it's just not really the same as it was back in the day. And the last gasp of air that we got out of these things was with the Nintendo 3DS and PS Vita. And even then, you know, like these handhelds both struggled in different ways. The Vita struggled its entire life, kind of just becoming like an enthusiast's handheld. Sold roughly around like 20 million units, so you know, there's definitely bigger flops out there. And I wouldn't consider this to be like a total flop, but I wouldn't consider this to be a success by any means. The Nintendo 3DS, by comparison, it did well. But compared to other Nintendo handhelds, like, I would say it definitely underperformed. I mean, what, this sold 75 million when its predecessor, the Nintendo DS, sold 150 million? Sold half as much. That is substantially less. But it does make sense when considering the time these came out. Oh, mobile gaming, that son of a bitch. I'd say smartphones and smartphone gaming really started to take off around 2009 to 2010. Like, I remember around that time, a lot of kids were getting iPod Touches, and I got an iPod Touch around 2010, and it was like, oh my God, this was so cool. I mean, the Nintendo DS was rad as hell back in the day because it's just like, oh my God, you have a full-blown touchscreen. Remember drawing stuff in PictoChat, messing around with that thing in multiple games like New Super Mario Brothers, the mini games in that game, and then you also had Nintendogs where you could use that, and you could also like speak to the Nintendo DS with the microphone. There was a lot of neat stuff with that hardware. So that mid to late 2000s era, believe me, it was pretty fun to get a little bit of a gimmick in your life with your portable media device. So when 2007 hit and the iPhone was introduced, like, I thought that was like the most insane looking thing of all time. It was also priced accordingly too, because it was like 500 bucks. So as amazing as the iPhone looked at the time, it was kind of like, okay, well that's like if I'm rich, or like if I win the lottery, whatever, like I'm not gonna be able to experience that right now. Plus, when the iPhone initially launched, it didn't launch with an app store, so playing games on that thing was just not very common. So I think the Nintendo DS and PSP, which were the main handhelds at the time, I think they were still sitting fairly comfortably, especially considering something like a smartphone was more so seen as like, that's for a full-grown adult. And the handhelds, you know, those definitely appealed more towards kids, teenagers, all of that. So things were okay around this time. I mean, you look at games that were on like regular cell phones, those things sucked ass. They were just awful. Like, there was nothing of value there. Yes, some cell phone games could be perfectly fine. And a lot of times they actually had like, you know, some games ported to cell phones. Like, you know, you could play some classic arcade games like Pac-Man, or, you know, they would port like Sonic 1 or something to a cell phone. Oftentimes they'd have like multi-platform games or adaptations of games on console. I know there was like a God of War cell phone game for like Java, but all the games on like these old ass cell phones were so clunky, they were slow, they didn't run very well, they were way too simple. They were just never gonna be at the quality of most of the games you were gonna get on the DS or PSP, or hell, even the Game Boy Advance, or even Game Boy Color, original Game Boy. There was still so much value in having a dedicated handheld, even if you had other personal media devices. Hell, I remember on the old school iPods, the ones with the click wheels, they offered iPod click wheel games, and a lot of those were kind of in the exact same like ballpark as an old school cell phone game. I'd say there was probably only like 30 or something they ever released. They were like $5 a pop. I remember having like Sonic 1 on the iPod, and yeah, it like functioned, and I thought it was kind of neat to have like a, you know, a full-blown game on like my iPod, you know, this thing that I really, really valued. I was able to put movies on it, music, TV shows, podcasts, all of that stuff. And hey, I can put games on there as well. But that was never gonna satisfy me for an extended period of time. It was always meant to be like a little like, oh my God, I'm bored out of my mind, so sure, I'll play a game on my iPod. And that's why you still needed a dedicated handheld. And for me personally, as a kid, you know, like I'd bring my DS places, and I'd bring my iPod too. I'd bring a portable DVD player on road trips or whatever, you know, like the DS was still gonna be a part of my repertoire of on-the-go entertainment. But eventually I upgraded to an iPod Touch. This right here was the original iPod Touch that I had as a kid back in 2010. 32 gigabytes, no camera or anything, but man, I packed a ton of stuff into this thing, just downloading all kinds of apps. The thing is, I don't even remember a lot of like great games I got right away. It took me a while to actually get a lot of like decent games for my iPod Touch. For the most part, I kind of just got a lot of free junk. I scrolled all the way back on my App Store purchases. I got Checkers, Pac-Man. You see, I got these on December 25th, 2008, because I think this was when I got an original iPod Nano for the first time. Like, I got it on Christmas. So I ran to the iTunes store and I just downloaded free stuff. I was like, oh boy, without really realizing like, yeah, I cannot access any of these. And then all of these things from April 12th, 2009 was because Apple was throwing like this sweepstakes where whoever downloaded like the 1 billionth app would get like a huge cash prize. And even though I didn't have an iOS device at the time, I was just like, well, shoot, I'm just gonna download some free apps, just crossing my fingers that I'm the guy. Yeah, man, look at this. This is like when I got my iPod Touch for the first time. I got the Target app, Bubble Popper, Shrek Cart free, Truth or Dare, Lemonade 2 free. I actually remember kind of liking that one. The Calorie Counter, Viper Smart Start. This was like an app where you could download it if you had a certain car, and then you could, you know, start the car from your phone. I never even had any of these cars. I just remember seeing this on a certain iPhone commercial, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. But yeah, every now and then you might see an actual game like The Sims 3 or the Oregon Trail, but for the most part, you can kind of tell I was just downloading whatever the hell. The iPhone and iPod Touch App Store had a ton of quantity, and there was some quality there. Eventually, I did dip my toes into the actually decent mobile games at the time, you know, your Angry Birds and Cut the Ropes and all that nonsense. And yeah, I am a certified cut the rope defender just because like everybody I ever talked to that I'm like, hey, remember like those classic mobile games from like 2011, 2012? What did you play? I really like Cut the Rope, and everybody always says I didn't give a fuck about Cut the Rope. Cut the Rope was damn good. But yeah, I would eventually like play actual mobile games on here, and you know, I could definitely tell like as the years went on, I was definitely picking up my dedicated handhelds less and less in regards to bringing them places. Of course, around 2011, I was still definitely super interested in the 3DS, and I did buy one around August of that year. And, you know, I played the hell out of my 3DS, and I would upgrade to like the 3DS XL and eventually like the new 3DS. But you know what's something I barely ever did? I barely ever left the house with my 3DS. I mean, for one, I was definitely getting older, so as time goes on, especially these days, I find it less and less necessary for me to bring entertainment with me on the go, especially when like I just have, my iPhone right now, and I can just, look up whatever. I just have like stuff on there. Like if I desperately need to be entertained, like whatever, I'm good. But I mean, these days I'm not really gonna bring a handheld with me different places, because like I don't know, I'm not really gonna have, it's dedicated video game time. So this right here, this was the start of adulthood. But I think around the time I got that smart device for the first time was when a lot of other people started to get them. And it kind of felt like if you could fit a bunch of decent games that are really cheap on something as small and thin as this that can do a billion other things, it's just not very necessary to have like a chunkier, beefier device with buttons and all this stuff where it's like, okay, well, you have like better games on here, but like, is that really worth like shoving this in your pocket alongside something like this, when this can just do everything? And on the go, I find that I'm definitely less picky about the quality of experiences I'm having. Yes, the 3DS had incredible games compared to the iPhone, which also had great games, but for the most part, I was definitely more interested in a lot of the games they're releasing on 3DS. But the iPhone's on me at all times. The 3DS or PS Vita, you have to make a concentrated effort to bring that with you places. And this is coming from somebody who's into this kind of crazy dumb shit. Think about casual consumer McGee. Yeah, they're more than happy with just Angry Birds on their iPod Touch. Yeah, sure, that's all the game they need for a while. The rise of smart devices is what killed the handheld. That's like the easiest thing for anybody to notice there. And I mean, it makes sense because like, yeah, these handhelds, as great as they are in fact kind of offering a somewhat similar product as to what mobile devices give you. Nintendo and Sony handhelds throughout the years have always given you lesser experiences than your console at home. Normally, games released for handhelds would be designed around quick pick up and play sessions. Not all the time, but they were kind of meant to give you like, oh yeah, you're free for 5 minutes. Here you go. Here's a level or two. And that's exactly what some of the most popular mobile games from back in the day were doing. Honestly, I find that 2010 era of iPhone games are kind of special, where it's like, yeah, they kind of gave you that arcade-like experience. Simple pick up and play fun. And with the accelerometer of the phone, you also have this giant multi-touch touchscreen. You were getting experiences you couldn't really get anywhere else on smartphones. So yeah, as lame as mobile devices were and are, we have to give them their flowers here. These things stood toe-to-toe with the dedicated handhelds at the time, and it makes total sense why these won. That doesn't mean I like it. I mean, yeah, like I do miss dedicated handhelds, because dedicated handhelds were generally where you'd get some of the most unique gaming experiences. I mean, let's just consider this for a second. Imagine if you've never seen a DS or 3DS or whatever in your life before. This looks fucking insane. What the f am I holding in my hand? Yeah, I got two screens. One is giant. Got this little circle thing that's like an analog stick. What? Hell, even the Vita is a back touchpad. Why? I mean, like, it wasn't even really utilized very well at all, but it's just like, I don't know, they were just throwing shit at the wall. Sure, a lot of the things crammed into both of these devices and previous handhelds throughout the years were definitely gimmicks, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I mean, they did add to a lot of the games on these devices being more experimental. On top of the fact that these systems having lower specs, you would have to create smaller experiences for them. It was easier for developers to warrant creating more out there games. You don't have to worry about giant budgets a lot of the time. You can just be like, you know what, we're gonna put out one quirky ass game for the 3DS because we can make it cheap and we can take advantage of a lot of the crazy crap they have jammed in here, like a glasses-free 3D screen, 2 cameras on the back here, gyroscope controls, all of that. And folks, that's the story of how we got Spirit Camera. Now, even though dedicated handhelds are a bit of a thing of the past, handheld gaming is thriving these days. I mean, you combine mobile gaming with something like a hybrid like the Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo Switch 1, Steam Deck, and like more people are playing portable video games than ever before. Oh, you look at something like the Nintendo Switch Lite. Hey, that is just a handheld. You can't do anything else with it. And yeah, the direction Nintendo took with the Switch family of consoles makes total sense. This satisfies all of their customer bases. The ones that only bought their handhelds, the one that only bought their consoles, and the ones that bought both. And no longer does Nintendo have to create specific 3DS games or specific DS games and then create specific home console games on the Wii or Wii U, whatever. They can just focus in on one sort of platform here. And I think that's incredibly smart, that's resourceful, it just makes sense. But as a replacement to the dedicated handheld and the dedicated home console, the Nintendo Switch is almost like a jack of all trades, master of none. Now as a console, I do think it's fine because, you know, Nintendo usually does put out lesser powerful home consoles. So when the Nintendo Switch 1 released, and you know, that was less powerful than the PS4 or Xbox One, it's like, well, the Wii U was also less powerful than the PS4 and Xbox One. The Switch was more powerful than the Wii U, so you have that, good for you. But it's just like, it was nothing we weren't used to at that point. But yes, you know, like, it is definitely an underpowered home console. But as a handheld, it was actually very capable, a very powerful handheld. However, I mean, this is a Switch 2, but it goes for the Switch 1 as well. How handheld really is this? Well, sure, I can hold it with my hands, but portability-wise, the Switch systems are definitely kind of a big step above what the 3DS is. In addition, you know, the screen is always exposed. Oh, come on, man. No funny little clamshell. And I personally find that a lot of things that felt very intuitive on the 3DS feel a lot clunkier on the Switch. Hey, the 3DS systems had one crappy-ass single-touch touchscreen, but the games that utilize the stylus for very precise drawing and whatnot, I mean, like, this just felt good. It was cheap, outdated technology, but I feel like this felt good in games that were designed around it. Games that use the touchscreen on the Switch, I always found them to feel kind of weird. Like, doing this with any of the Switch systems just doesn't feel right. I don't know, man. You know, holding it with one hand and using your finger, you know, like, it just feels a little off. But you know, how much of this stuff really matters, because the Nintendo Switch combined home console and handheld gaming. And nowadays, a lot of these smaller, lower budget stuff you would see on handhelds like the 3DS and Vita, DS, and PSP, a lot of those games are just available on all platforms now. But I almost feel like because of that, because a lot of these smaller scale projects are on these much bigger platforms, the expectations are higher and budgets can kind of get a little crazier with them because you don't really have the limitations of the lower end hardware of something like the 3DS. Something like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, phenomenal game right there. 2D Metroidvania, it was one of the best games of 2024, and it got all these rave reviews, but it just didn't sell as well as Ubisoft was expecting, so yeah, that team disbanded. I love that more games than ever before you can get on like any platform that you want, you know, like so many games, you know, like I can just play them right on my Switch right here, or I can play them on my PS5, I can play them on my Xbox Series X. Doesn't matter if they're AAA games or smaller scale projects. But sometimes, man, limitations can help breathe creativity in amazing places. And developers trying to make the most of handheld experiences have created some of the best games of all time. The PSP had such a wide variety of games, and it felt like it was like a home console in your pocket, even if, you know, it couldn't quite get there in many regards. It damn near felt like a home console in your pocket, so much so that you did get a lot of home console ports, which at the time was like badass, and these days it's still incredibly impressive they were able to do that. But the PSP got a lot of very unique games. Even if you love it or hate it, something like Metal Gear Acid, like something like this, even if it's not everybody's cup of tea at all, you know, card-based tactical Metal Gear spin-off, this is a much easier concept to swallow just because it's like, well, it's on a handheld, you know, like might as well, you know, handheld is for the more experimental, kind of smaller things. Hell, Rockstar Games put out Beta Raider, which is literally like a music creation tool on the PSP. Why the hell not? Games like Danganronpa really thrived on the Vita. I know this was a PSP game in Japan originally. But part of me wonders if this game would have become as beloved as it did if it launched immediately on like all platforms, if it was just on PS4 right from the get-go. Being on the Vita kind of helped this game stand out immediately, and just this cult fan base kind of just started accumulating for this game. And being on a dedicated handheld, I think really kind of pulls everything about this game much more together than fun if it just immediately launched on a home console. The game has such a unique vibe with its like kind of like 3D environments you can kind of go around in. And yeah, if that just launched the way it did on current gen platforms, it would have been like, well, this looks like kind of like dog shit. But it all kind of comes together on handheld. Like, it makes sense here. And then when you get it ported to other platforms, I think it makes a lot more sense when it's just like, oh yeah, this was originally a PSP and Vita game. And honestly, the way this game looks and feels and just how everything plays out, it's just so memorable. And I just wonder if like a lot of that vibe would have been retained if it just kind of came out on just a fucking home console. Who cares? Then you have games that take advantage of just the full suite of features these handhelds have. Stuff like Tearaway on the Vita. You have Mario 3D Land on the 3DS using the 3D screen. Dedicated handhelds are where you would oftentimes get some of the most unique experiences. But I'd be lying if I said, oh wow, it doesn't make sense why we're here today. Because by like 2013, 2014, I mean, these things were already kind of a tougher sell. Just play games on your iPhone. It's as simple as that. Or why not just wait till you get home to play your games? You know, like, oh, it's just like, oh my God, I could play Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified on the PS Vita. Yeah, well, that game sucks ass. And is it really worth it to spend 200, 250 bucks on a Vita and like 40, 50 bucks on this exclusive Call of Duty game that sucks ass just so you have a Call of Duty game to play on the bus when you could just wait a little bit and just play the Call of Duty game that you actually want to play at home on your Xbox One? These things were just a bit too much of an investment when it just made sense to just have your iPhone and have your home console and you're good to go. But the thing is, I don't think anybody really like inherently wanted to do that. It just made the most sense. Because I think everybody could agree the games releasing on the actual handhelds were what everybody wanted. I remember in high school, it was the talk of the town for a couple of weeks, how there was kind of an exploit people found where you could download a Game Boy Advance emulator onto the iPhone without having to jailbreak it. This was back in 2014. I know emulators are on the iPhone App Store these days, but yeah, that was a big deal because people were like, oh my God, I can play all these actual games I want to fucking play. The thing is, the smartphone is a device that can do damn near everything. And I think in that general era, it was taking over hardcore. Everybody was getting a smartphone, so everything was just getting dropped for the smartphone equivalent. You know, nobody was getting MP3 players anymore. Nobody was getting handheld game systems anymore. Nobody was buying dedicated cameras. You know, it felt cool as hell to have this all-in-one device. But I think eventually, as time went on, I think we all kind of started to realize that, you know what? It's kind of nice to have some separation in our lives. Yeah, it's convenient to have all these games on my phone, but isn't it nice to have a handheld device that's exclusively for video games? And I think the Nintendo Switch came into the picture around that exact time, and I think a lot of people started to see the light here. But I think the Switch did something very important. It was very adamant that this is a home console that you can take on the go. This was not marketed as, oh, it's a handheld that you can also plug into the TV. Nintendo in 2017 was all about saying the Switch is a home console. That's what they always said. I think it was partially because they wanted to keep supporting the 3DS during that time, just in case the Switch failed. But nowadays, you go on any wiki, you go on anything, like the Switch is considered a hybrid console. But I think that was the key thing here. Because like I said, you'd pay about the same price for a Vita and just play like kind of like really crappy downgraded B team, C team versions of games that you want to play on your PS4. The Nintendo Switch really pushed that these are the same games you'd be playing on home console. Yes, a lot of ports on the Switch were kind of crappy, but still, like that was what the Switch was all about. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, these are handheld games, or oh yeah, these are home console games. These are just video games now, and you can play them in handheld or you can play them on a home console. And we saw with the introduction of the Steam Deck how it's just like, hey, yeah, these are just your Steam games and you can play them on the go. You may not be able to play everything, like not everything may work well, but it's just like for the most part, this is just a PC that you can just take wherever you want. And yeah, that's what people wanted. It's convenient, it makes sense, it's resourceful, but obviously the charm of getting a handheld version of a series or a handheld spin-off or like just this unique little game that's only on a handheld, whatever, like the charm of those games isn't really on these handhelds as much as I'd want it to be. There's definitely some stuff. I mean, like the Switch and Switch 2 always gets like some funky little Nintendo magic on there that's just like, wow, that's fucking weird and stupid, but you know, I love it. Like that stuff is still kind of there. But I think the way the industry is moving, like it's so much more about like just AAA fucking explosions, just like the big boy games all over the place. And you know, that's something that I think these handhelds kind of allowed us to kind of escape from. You know, have games that were on much more limited hardware to the point where it's like a game can't cost $300 million to make on a 3DS. That's not gonna happen. So I don't want to be a little negative Nancy here about like, man, I miss handhelds. Like, yeah, I miss handhelds, but it's also like I'm very content with how things are with like the Nintendo Switch and how things are with the Steam Deck and just how things are in general with handheld gaming. Like I'm 100% happy with the direction Nintendo took with this. I think it's what made sense and it's what I want. But I can also still miss the dedicated handheld too. Like I miss that, but I understand and I do overall like this direction. But you know, like I can still whine if I want to. But here's the thing. If you miss dedicated handhelds, there are options out there for you. What's your fucking problem? Aren't you happy? Okay, this is the stuff I'm primarily talking about here. Firstly, we have the Playdate, which is probably one of the most charming handhelds that have released. Like, oh man, look at this. Whoa, jump scare. Yeah, it has a crank. That's fun. Now, I haven't actually even used this yet. I just got it and I haven't even turned it on. But I've always found this to be a pretty charming little device. A very non-essential one. But that's kind of the point. It's meant to be this fun little novelty with a very unique experience here. Just the fact that you use a crane to control games and it has the type of screen that it has and its game delivery system, like it's all very unique and it's meant to be just kind of like a quirky, fun little thing you have. It's not really meant to be like an actual like, oh my god, I'm using this handheld every single waking moment. Like no, it's meant to be just like a cute little thing, a doodad, if you will. So yeah, the Playdate, it's really hard to dislike this thing. It's just cute. It's a cool little thing, and I think that this is the best way to describe it. It's a fun little doodad. And I also recently got this. This is an Evercade. I've seen a lot of people talk about this on YouTube, and I gotta be honest, I've always kind of had a bit of a cynical outlook on this thing. It's a dedicated handheld where they release these physical cartridges for it that are primarily like compilations of retro games or maybe indie games that'll run on it. It's kind of a handheld designed entirely as like a little throwback handheld console. But that's kind of all it really is, in my opinion. It's just kind of like, here's a handheld, and we licensed a bunch of games from a lot of companies, and you know, we release cartridges every now and then, and yeah, you can play them on your handheld. That's kind of it. That's all. That's kind of the unique thing about it, is just like, oh yeah, it's kind of a retro feeling handheld in the modern day. My thing is, a lot of the games that release on it are also released on something like the Switch. So it's just like the Tomb Raider games. It's cool as hell that those are on the Evercade, but it's also like the cost of this physical copy here is about the exact same as the cost of the Tomb Raider collection on Switch, the physical version of that, in fact. So like, oh, the fact that like, oh man, it's a physical cartridge and stuff, like that's not very unique. The handheld feels nice and it looks nice and everything, though, you know, it's obviously going to be like a step below what the Nintendo Switch is. But even then, like, I would say like this entire thing is very comparable in price to like a Nintendo Switch Lite. To be completely honest, the entire existence of this handheld feels like it's just for people who just want to buy stuff. Like, oh boy, I want to collect a bunch of cartridges and stuff, and I want to put them on my shelf. I just want to buy more games, you know, like that's all this really feels like to me. It's just kind of just like a handheld for that if you want something new to collect. But I'm not gonna lie, like, I do think it is kind of charming, and you know, like I do see the appeal, but I also like it just kind of reaffirms that, you know, the hybrid model that Nintendo is doing really does make a lot of sense. Because like I'm saying, why the hell would I actually buy the Tomb Raider games on this? Like right now, like I went on Amazon and this collection is more expensive on the Evercade than it is on the Nintendo Switch, and that version has far more features. The death of dedicated handheld systems makes sense. It is sad, but it's also like, what? Do I really think Nintendo should drop what they're doing with the Switch and just go immediately back to like, oh yeah, do this kind of stuff again? That'll be interesting, and they could probably do some interesting stuff, interesting gimmicks, all of that, but it just doesn't make sense. Stuff like the PlayStation Portal shows that there is a demand for playing games handheld, but I just don't really think there's as much of a demand for dedicated handhelds. And that's a shame, but it also makes a ton of sense. But hey, thank God we have My Arcade here with this kind of stuff we can buy at Walmart for $20. See, it has a flap right here, so you can tell what you're buying is actual dog shit.